Hi, everyone. My name is Milo Primo. I use he, they pronouns. I'm a white, queer, trans person, civil rights attorney licensed in New York State, and also the CEO of Just Roots Consulting. I'm really excited to bring this training to you today about your rights as LGBTQ students in New York State. Just as a disclaimer, this training is only current as of December 2021. Laws, regulations, policies, and rules change. Use this as a resource to kind of get you started, but always look into it a little bit further to make sure that the information is still updated. And feel free to contact an attorney for the most up-to-date information and explanation about how to exercise your rights. Okay, everybody. So before we jump into New York State specific rights, I just want to give some context about how these state rights work in the grand scheme of things. So as you may or may not know, we have federal laws that create a federal floor that everybody in the United States is supposed to abide by. States are allowed to add to the federal floor, add additional protections, additional rights, additional options for you to exercise those rights, but they're not supposed to dig in deeper below the federal floor. Some states have done that. They've created additional rights like New York. New York State has pretty expansive rights that protect LGBTQ folks in a lot of different aspects of life. Some states like Ohio and Texas, for example, those certainly not the only ones, have hung out at the federal floor. So people who live in those states are really reliant on what is happening with the federal law to make up their rights and their protections. As long as we live in a state like New York, we have additional rights and protections that cover us no matter what happens to the federal law. In addition, depending on where you live, you might have even more rights that are passed by your city or county in the form of ordinances that might be even more expansive. New York City is a really great example of this, but it's not the only one. So if you live in New York City in one of the 5 boroughs, definitely check out your local laws and rules to see what other kind of protections you might have. If you live outside of New York City in the rest of the state, like I do, I live in Livingston County, then this training is definitely for you. All right, so let's talk about what rights folks have in New York State if you are a student who identifies as LGBTQ or is being perceived to be LGBTQ. So the first thing to note is that New York State has something called the Dignity for All Students Act. This is also called DASA. This protects public school students who are in kindergarten through 12th grade from discrimination, intimidation, taunting, harassment, and bullying on school property, school buses, and at school functions, which may be off campus. Every school is required to have a DASA coordinator. This is somebody who is assigned the role of making sure that students know about their rights under DASA and that they enforce those rights with the school by being the person who takes complaints and investigates complaints when they come in. Something that's really important is that there's no private right of action under DASA, which means that you can't sue your school for not complying with DASA in any way. What you can do is file a bunch of complaints every time something happens. So if you experience let's say misgendering or dead naming in the classroom by your teacher or by other classmates and the teacher doesn't do anything about it, or you are being kept from fully participating in activities because of your LGBTQ identity, if you're being asked invasive questions about your body or anything else, your relationships, all of these things could be DASA complaints, and you should file a complaint that the coordinator and that the school has to investigate and deal with. But at no point would you be able to sue the school for violating DASA. Another important thing to know about DASA is that any person can file a complaint or a report of a DASA violation with the DASA coordinator at the school or any other school official. So it can be you, the student, it can be your parents, it could be your teacher, it could be your classmates, it could be a concerned community member who knows something is going on and feels the need to let the school know about it. And again, under DASA, the coordinator of the school have to investigate every report they receive. So at the very least, this allows you to become a squeaky wheel, which sometimes can be a very effective self-advocacy tool if needed. Another tool in the tool belt that we have is the New York State Education Department issued a few years ago a guidance for school districts on how to treat and support their trans and gender nonconforming or gender expansive students for record keeping, for school activities, a whole host of things. So it is a helpful guidance. It was written now so almost over 6 years ago. I can count, and needs to be updated. There's some changes in the law that have occurred since then that are really important, that really call for an update of this guidance. But it is a good starting place if you need something to bring to the school, to point to things that they can do right now to better support you or your student in the school environment. Another tool we have, and this is really a very important tool, this one I strongly encourage you to pay attention to, is the New York State Human Rights Law, which protects against discrimination and harassment based on actual or perceived race, national origin, religion, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity expression, and disability, among other statuses. This is just to name a few, because these are some of the common ones that our LGBTQ students will face. What's really important here is that our law now explicitly covers sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. And it also covers disability. And this is important because under a regulation, gender dysphoria is included as a recognized disability under the human rights law. So if you are a student or your student age child has gender dysphoria, has been diagnosed with it, and they are experiencing misgendering, dead naming, or not being able to access facilities that are appropriate to their gender, for example, all of those things might be a failure by the school to provide reasonable accommodations for a disability. So it's an additional claim that you might have, and it's something to bear in mind. Schools are definitely covered by the human rights law now, in addition to places of employment, access to credit, places of public accommodation, which is where life happens in public, which is like everywhere pretty much, and housing, both private and public housing. So the human rights law is pretty expansive in that way. So what schools are covered? Under the human rights law, any public schools covered. So this includes public school districts, charter schools, the BOCES programs, public colleges and universities, and also any of those universal pre-K Head Start programs. In addition, most private schools are covered with the exception of for-profit religious schools. That actually makes up a very small portion of the students in the entire state. So the vast majority of students in the state of New York are going to be protected under this law. So what does this look like? It can look like a lot of things. I've already talked about a few of them. It might be, being called names or epithets that are homophobic or transphobic. It might be being dead named or misgendered by your teacher or by your classmates or by the administrators at the schools. It might also be especially in the post-COVID world that we're in, where we're still doing some hybrid schoolwork, being muted or being kicked out of class by teachers if you are an LGBTQ student, being asked inappropriate questions about your body, your identity, your relationships, things that really are not pertinent to anything else that's going on, but are being asked anyway, or being kept from being able to access facilities that are appropriate to your gender identity. It might be harassment because of the relationship that you are in, whatever relationship that might be, that is sort of a non-heterosexual relationship. It might also be for being trans or gender expansive or non-binary in some way. And of course, not being able to access the facilities that are appropriate to your gender. So what can you do if you feel like you have experienced some of these things or anything else that might be related to being to discrimination or harassment based on your LGBTQ status by your school? You have the right to file a complaint. You can do this by filing an administrative complaint with the New York State Division of Human Rights, which is the state agency tasked with enforcing the human rights law. Or you can skip that and go straight to court if you want to. I'm a big fan of using the Division of Human Rights process. It is free, it is relatively fast, and it's pretty user-friendly, and you do not need an attorney to represent you to do it. There is a 1-year statute of limitations, though. So if you are actively experiencing discrimination or harassment, or if the last time you did was less than a year ago, this would be a really good option for you to file something with the State Division of Human Rights. Alternatively, you have 3 years to file in court. So if it's been more than a year that you experienced that discrimination, but it's less than 3 years, then you still have time to file something in court instead. With this, it's likely to be more complicated, more expensive, and much lengthier as far as a process goes. So I strongly encourage you to seek out legal advice and counsel and possibly representation by an attorney who can explain your rights to you and help you navigate that process. If you're interested in pursuing the Division of Human Rights complaint process, check out the Division of Human Rights website. It's very comprehensive. They have the actual law and all the regulations there. They explain the complaint process in detail, who's eligible for it, what the process looks like, and what to expect. And they also provide forms that you can access directly on the website to fill out your complaint with explanations about how to do so. Once you file a complaint, again, within the year statute of limitations, the next thing that will happen is the division will assign an investigator to your case. They'll investigate the complaint within about 6 months and come up with what's called a probable cause finding. This is where they think that it's more likely than not that discrimination occurred or not. If you get a probable cause determination, you'll have an opportunity to try to settle with the school and try to come up with some sort of resolution so that you can, find some closure, get compensated or reimbursed for any harm that you experienced, correct the wrongs that have occurred or fix the policies that were harmful, and be able to move on with your life. Most people who get probable cause findings are able to find a settlement before reaching the public hearing phase. However, if you're not able to reach a settlement, you will be given an opportunity to present your case in front of an administrative law judge at public hearing. If you've done this without an attorney so far and you're doing it what's called pro se or unrepresented, at that stage, the Division of Human Rights will actually assign an attorney for you to present your case on your behalf. So even if you don't have an attorney at that point, you won't be left alone and to your own devices at the public hearing. So it's not such a scary thing. As you're preparing to advocate for yourself, definitely keep these things in mind to make your case as strong as possible. Make a tangible trail of evidence every time that you can. File those DASA reports or Title IX complaints. Title IX is the federal law that protects students from sex discrimination in school environments. File these complaints, file the reports, keep copies of those reports, and keep notes about what happens to them. If you're filing DASA reports and the school knows that there's a problem and they are not really doing anything about it, that would really help your case, right? So be sure to keep copies of all of those things. Also keep copies of any texts, emails, voicemails, social media posts or comments on social media posts, anything that would help support the case if there's a teacher or an administrator or another student or parent who's causing issues, that you can capture that evidence on file. Eyewitnesses are always extremely helpful. If there's anybody who has heard or seen what it is that you're complaining about and would be willing to speak out about that, either in a sworn affidavit or as a testimony at the public hearing, those things can be very helpful. And finally, medical evidence. So any medical records, if you or if you're a parent, your student has experienced any physical or emotional harm as a result of the discrimination or harassment at school, having medical records that can show that will help support your case as well. So as you're doing this, some basic order of advocacy: let the school know there's a problem. File those DASA complaints, file those Title IX complaints. Let the school know that something is going on. Give the school an opportunity to fix it. If they don't fix it, that's when you can go full steam ahead with filing a formal complaint with the Division of Human Rights or with the state court if that's something you're interested in doing. And all along the way, no matter what, keep records of everything. It's very important. If you have any other questions or need some more information, check out these websites. They're the links to the New York State Division of Human Rights to learn about that complaint process, the New York State Education Department to learn about the trans student guidance, and also the New York City Education Department to see their trans student guidance if you are in New York City in one of the 5 boroughs. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope it was helpful, and I wish you the best of luck in exercising your rights. Take care.